like to thank Richard and the Architecture Foundation for this opportunity, to reflect a little bit. I try as much as I can to use these opportunities to reflect a little bit on what we do in our daily practice, because the everyday of this profession is really, it's really hard to stop and think about what you're doing or trying to do. So when Richard told me about the topic, the general topic of economy, a very challenging one because it's so open. But I thought that maybe thinking about what we try to do in the projects, I thought maybe to approach economy in a way that talking about aspects that are not part of the budget of the project or are not in the briefing of a project. What I intend to discuss is how architecture, of course, society as a whole, but architecture can play an active and important role in the processes of attributing value, identifying resources, maybe in that order is better, identifying resources and attributing value to these resources that are sometimes hidden or not obvious to everyone, or maybe to the client. And by doing that, sometimes achieving unsolicited outcomes of these projects. So I will try to use some concrete experiences to show, I think, something that is part of our attitude towards any project that we have to face, and part of a strategy that we try to apply every time we can. I would just like to apologize for my English is, in Portuguese we say it's a little bit rusted because I haven't used it for a while. So I put some images to, which I hope will make more clear the point, the things that I'm trying to point out. This, of course, is something that was a process that now I see it clearly, or I am aware that we tried to do that, but that was something that we discovered during these years that we have been working. Because, and this I think is important to say before I start. I'm from Brazil, and it's, as you know, it's a very unequal society, a very unequal country, undeveloped in unequally undeveloped, very developed in some aspects, but completely undeveloped on others. And this idea of the new, we are in the new world, and as a culture, the value of the new was something very strong in my education. For instance, I was in architecture school in the end of the 90s, from 95 to 2001. And even then, this idea of the new as something good in itself, opposed to the old as something bad or undesirable, was very present in my education. So to get rid of that took some years, because, when we talk about the informal city, in my education, in my formal education during school, it was seen as something to be wiped off, something to forget and start from scratch. That was no interest at all in informal settlements. The existing city as a whole was not really that we were thought to look carefully and to try to understand its value. So I wanted to point that out before I start, because I believe the context where you are, or most of you are from, is very different from that. So I will start with two school projects, public schools, and all the projects that I will show are public projects. That was something that, since we started the office in 2002, we had to go after the work. The work never came to us. So, and the public sector was a way that we could sometimes reach some work. And this is a project from 2003, finished in 2006, a public school, part of a big public school building program that most of these buildings were had to be part of this informal city, this completely undeveloped, uninfrastructured city. And this, let's say, this is the city that we had to deal with. And this was something that we were thought that should be forgotten and wiped off. So, and that is what I mean about identifying resources. It took a lot of effort from us to understand how much value there was in this place already, existing value, existing resources, that we could use them towards a common goal. You could use them in our advantage, or we could just ignore them, and they would probably become disadvantages in the, in the life of the building after its completion. So in this kind of environment that we were working, ground floor was a very valuable resource. There was no public space because it was completely self-built part of the city, where each family built their own homes, but there was no concern from start with public space, except circulation spaces to allow people to move in and out of this part of the city. And we had to design, there were two different offices to design two schools on a single site, very limited one. But it was also unconfigured. The plot, the site was not really, had no clear boundaries. It was a very abstract idea of the formal organization of the site, but we knew that the ground floor was valuable, and that we could, by making the building denser and in this case more vertical, we could release a part of the ground floor to create a very small open public space that we thought was important to create an urban identity to this building that would be just placed in the middle of a neighborhood that was not really counting on that. So for us to release this small part of the site to become like a central, an open plaza and entrance and exits, the urban address of this school was very important. And of course, this is is a very modest goal, a very small open plaza, but that we had a clear vision that it should be unfenced, without fences, without walls. The clients wanted walls, wanted fences, because in this environment, the public institutions many times look at the the users around it as aggressors. They defend themselves from the neighbors, and this of course creates this relation. If you're defending, then defense and attack are completely related. So what most of our design, the meetings that we had with the clients, which was these public institutions, was to allow us to leave a part of the site open 24 hours, even when the school was closed, for public use. And in the end, this is this public space that I'm talking about. Of course, is a very optimistic view of the architect to call this, a open public space. You have to be optimistic, but in the scale of the neighborhood, it was, the only paved flat surface in the surroundings. It could be used, and then after the building was finished, we saw these uses happening for sports, skating, bicycle, public gathering. It became a place in the neighborhood, a public space in its really full sense, and because of that, it started as well affecting the surroundings. So because this place was now had active street vendors started to work in this area. The houses that were in front of the school became shops, and just by this very small action, but it took a lot of effort from us to make this happen. This became like a small center in this very fragmented urban area. So and that didn't cost anything. Actually, it costed less because we didn't spend money on these walls and gates and fences. The building makes the separation between public and private or privately used spaces. So with the same money or less money, we did the schools, and we also provided a small public space, which played a very important role because, on the other hand, the community saw this this opening, as a dialogue with this life, this urban life that was already there. And the school for many years now had just very little problems compared to other schools with vandalism, because they understand that the school is reaching them a hand, and they react in the same open and generous way. So this experience really opened our eyes to, to, let's say, try to leave out our prejudgments and try really to find values, resources, material, immaterial, but also material resources that could be part of the what we have in hand to work with, and by putting these resources in the table to provide unsolicited outcomes as like this really small urban center in this case. This is another example with a public school project that we did a few years after that one, where we had to replace an existing school building that was too small and was in very bad conditions. And the previous school was a one-story school next to a river. There was, you know, these areas, because of drainage infrastructure that never comes, was this is the bed bird, you know, this is the one I was talking about. Um, it was occupied by informal settlements. There is, but when we designed the project, there was a favela here. So the school uh, placed its back to this informal city, and let's say the official front of the school was to the other side, which was a very problematic space because the sidewalks were too narrow. There was heavy traffic here, so it was very unsafe for the students. And at the same time, along this riverbanks, this is the favela that was on the other side of the river. And this was an unused space that it was the back of the original school. And this was also a very unsafe space, very problematic. So enhancing this negative relation between the school and its surrounding. So in this process here, the main decision of the project probably was to shift the entrance of the school, to transform the back into a front. But this was also very hard because this was not a legal land. It was, at the first, we weren't allowed to do this because this was not formally available land, public space. It was nothing. It was like an uncharted part of the city. And that took some legal paperwork, but in the end, we were able to displace this, the access. And just by doing that, we changed the urban function of all this area next to the school, which is as the same size of the school ground floor. You know, the same site area was transformed just by this action of moving the access point. And of course, then the front of the school is looking now at the favela, which it was denying before, which was a contradiction because most of the students come from there. So it was really obvious that we had to do this shift. And just by doing that, this became a public space, what we could maybe call like a small park, but active, you know, a place. It also became a place. This area, which was nothing, which was a problem, an urban problem, became a public space. And of course, we tried to relate the school with this space as much as we could. From the interior experience of it, but mostly with very, this actually was not this huge bench. We didn't even design it because it was illegal. We couldn't build it actually, but with informal conversations with the school institution that were our clients, and with some public agents, they allowed the construction company to build this, but actually without any design, just a bench that also created some protection to the children from the river. But the outcome of this, you know, of this strategy is that we created a public space as big as the school without any extra money needed for that. This is a social housing complex that some other aspects of these ideas that I'm trying to point out appear. It was originally a favela, in very bad conditions. So there was an arrangement that the inhabitants of this favela would move temporarily. The complex would be built, and they would move back in to these new buildings. This was the state before of the favela before the intervention. And in this case, what I think were resources very useful to the design was the necessity to provide some public infrastructure, daycare, a small hospital, and commercial equipment, which was like a restaurant, a school restaurant. And this mixed use, which let's say the most important thing that we did here was not the design of the buildings, but to convince the institutions that the programs had to be juxtaposed, you know, overlapped, mixed, because that was really not what they wanted from the beginning. But this is what finally we achieved. So the daycare here is in this part, sharing the site with the housing blocks, etc. This is the other part with the small hospital here, the restaurant, the diversity of the residential buildings, the social housing buildings. And also in this case, what we tried to achieve was as much public space as we could by retreating, eliminating fences, walls, creating a very open relation and you know, very visible relation between this this program, this residents that were there, they were there for decades, but seen by its surrounding as a problem. And now what we tried with this mix of uses and putting as much public space as we could was to avoid this this idea of the ghetto that the favela was before the intervention. So in these streets, everybody feels safe and free to walk, to access these public equipments, urban, let's say this bench, which serves as a waiting for the fathers of the kids that go to school, also can be used by skaters that live, you know, maybe in the housing buildings, but also in the other buildings in the surroundings. And at a small scale, also a resource that we understood in the favela, this micro communities that are formed in the arrangement, or maybe 3 or 4 housing units that happen all the time in the favelas, in the informal organization. We try to provide, you know, with limitations, some space for that to happen as well in this now formal city, these buildings with elevators, etc. But to making this circulation space a little bit wider and bigger than what they were asking us to design. So this could be, you know, could house this use of neighbors meeting and you know, creating a very this micro social space between units in the same floor or between floors, etc. This is the daycare relating to the buildings. And one very interesting thing that I like when I see this is we delivered the project. This is the roof of the daycare. We had some ramps and slopes that were part of the design, but we didn't know that the schools used this, like this really small tricycles. They have like hundreds of it in the school. And the ramps proved themselves to be amazing playing areas for the kids. So the school saw these ramps that for us were just ramps as a resource, and they created a racetrack, an amazing racetrack using this these ramps that the architects really didn't saw the potential. So it's really interesting how this identification of resources comes from everywhere. And the final example I would like to show is, because in these cases we were very much involved with informal settlements and very precarious conditions. Case, it is a very established and important museum in the city of São Paulo that had to be renovated. The museum is in this building, and it's part of a huge, very rare urban design in the city of São Paulo. We don't have many examples of something as monumental or as big as this within the city. And of course, the value of this is, everybody agrees with all the resources that are already there, that everybody agrees that are there. The outside spaces, the buildings, the interior spaces. But this architecture was is very curious, because it was is a building from the end of the 19th century. And a big part of it was designed to be seen from the outside. It was a monument, not really a building to be experienced from the inside, or not as much as to be seen from the outside. So there were many unused spaces, such as this one here on the roof. There, you know, it was an ornamentation that, you know, operated in the scale of this monumental urban design, but locally it was really it was not a space. So what we tried to do with the renovation that needed new stairs, elevators, and etc., was to find spaces within the existing structure that were not used and reveal them in a new way. So the back side of the original architecture became part of the exhibition space of this new museum that is under construction right now. And by moving, just as we did in the school project, displacing the entrance point to a part of the building, or a part of this complex that was not meant to be the entrance, which is this big wall here, we were able to connect as well the museum with its surroundings in a very more interesting way. So the museum will be able to develop outdoor programs and activities that it couldn't do before, because there was this very rigid, formalized entrance point displaced from its outside surroundings, outdoor surroundings. And this is like revealing the structure of the original roofs. The structures are there. We just took the roof tiles to reveal all this, and also creating new exhibition spaces and this observatory on the roof that also allows, you know, to understand the dimension of this whole operation here. And just to finish, to close, this is a project that we are starting right now. Is the reconstruction of the National Museum in Rio, which was destroyed by a major fire in 2018. And what we have now are just the ruins of the original building, which is in these conditions right now. These are some of the interior spaces created by this, the big fire. And I really believe that much of the possible success that we could have with this project will come from understanding how to transform these ruins in very valuable resources for this new museum, and also the memory of what happened, because there is at a first moment most people try to erase this disaster from the history of the building. But if we are able to give this event an interesting meaning, a valuable meaning, then it will become a resource that will add a lot of value for the new museum that will arise from the operation that will be undertaken. So this is the final image. I hope I was clear. I don't know if I was able to explain what I wanted to, but anyway, thank you for the invitation. And
that was brilliant, Pablo. Thank you, and very clear.